1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What do we need? 7. 1. Oh, Ziggy's under the table, so I can't. I'm doing a count. Thousands of viewers at home watching the meeting at the moment that we've just had a little bit of a briefing which took us over time. To all of those thousands of get nothing, wouldn't we? Capital portfolio monitoring. 49. Convene the meeting. We're on item 9, Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report, page 49. And Chris is up here. Chris and Natalie.
Morena, Council Laws and Mangai Bella. Look, I'll just make some summary comments and then we're here to answer questions. So I think just as a summary comment, we're in the process of delivering a very large capital program. Overall, as an organisation, I believe that we're doing really well on all of the things that are in our control. Look, as an organisation, we've ramped up significantly in terms of our delivery. We're 55% more spent at this time, at this point in time, than we were last year. So that's not by accident. That's a result of deliberate ramping up to deliver a big program and look after our assets. So, look, at this point in time, we are signalling $36.9 million out of 250 of carryovers or deferrals. Of this, almost $22 million relate to projects that are tendered and are underway and will finish on time. So it's just we estimate the cost and the timing of the projects, we let tenders, and then we re-evaluate the timing of the tenders. So large.
Chris, can you expand on that again? So of the 36.9.
Yep.
That's not the old-fashioned carryover. Some of it is stuff that will get done within the 3 years, but changed around.
Yep.
Okay.
So it is the old-fashioned carryover because what we're signaling. In terms of 1 year, it is. Yeah. In terms of 1 year. So what we're signalling is we won't spend of that those projects $20 million are related to projects that are not in bad shape or going wrong. They're going really well, in fact, but we won't spend the money this year, but we will spend it next year and in some cases the year after. So projects are in good shape, they'll finish on time. And this relates to a lot of our large infrastructure projects like treatment plant upgrades, big wastewater pipe replications we're doing, etc. So there will be deferrals, but a large portion of them are for projects that are in really good shape and we're making good progress on.
So for council, that's a benefit. It reduces our debt, reduces our interest, which helps us a tiny bit with our balance in the books and those.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
For the community, so it's not new development. It's water plants and things like that. So to what extent does that reduce the level of service to our community? That it's delivered later.
I guess that's my point, that they won't be delivered later. They're basically on track to be delivered. It's just a cash timing issue of when the work's been done. So all of those projects are largely being delivered to the community in more or less the timing that the community expects from our 10-year plan.
Okay, thank you.
So of the balance of the deferrals, some are related to what we call third-party issues, where we have funding that we can only spend if a developer is there doing his work at the same time, so we're dependent on those third parties. and some others have various reasons for deferrals, and we've set all of those out in attachment 3 for your information. So in addition to those deferrals, we have signalled that we have a large property purchase program for peacocks in particular, and some of that funding that we've set aside this year might not be spent this year and it might be spent next year. But once again, we're on target through the process that we're going through to purchase the property in the 3-year period that we're talking about, just ahead of construction projects. So look, my overview is that we are doing really well in delivery of our projects. Finally, the thing we're signalling is we are starting to see some savings coming through. We've signalled $4.1 million of savings, and they are genuine savings in terms of projects that we're doing and doing cheaper. And I expect that will grow towards the end of the year. So when we get to the end of the year, that number will be bigger. That's my expectation. So look, it's probably best for me to stop there and just answer any specific questions that councillors may have.
Thanks, Chris. James. Excuse me.
Just one question. Page 57, 83, Thomas Gordonton. It says there that there have been some things happening there that have impacted on the costings. So there's been an increase in costings there at Gordonton Road because of extra construction and service relocations. Do we know how much that's gone up by?
So the project will still be delivered in the cost that we've agreed with council. So when we start a project like this, we put a contingency amount in to deal with unforeseen issues. So my last check with the project manager last week is, even though we've had these delays, it will be accommodated within budget. So the issue for us is really the timing issue, and I think we're due to complete it in March, which is not far away now, but it will be delivered for the cost that we've agreed with council.
Okay, so that's the whole Thomas Gordonton Road corridor set for 12 million.
Sorry, that's for the intersection I'm talking about, the Gordonton Road Thomas intersection, which is a component of the corridor study.
Yeah, so that's the whole component of that 12 million. So it's still within that 12 million. It's okay.
I think the intersection is an individual project within that corridor, and we've been to council and got approval to do that individual project for a price that's something less than the $12 million. So that project will be delivered for the price that we spoke to council about. I just can't remember what the figure was. It was something like $3 million or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Siggy.
Mr. Chair, and thank you for that report. Look, I've just got a question for on page 52, Citywide Community Program. And I thought I read it somewhere, but maybe I'm wrong. But the contract for the delivery of the Waiwhakareke development project has been awarded. When do we think that's going to open for the public to be used on a regular basis?
I might have to look to somebody else to help with it.
From July onwards. Okay, that's awesome. Now,
That's this calendar year, not this July's next financial year. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
as long as there's no adverse weather events happening. The other question I have is, with that development and with working on it, have we ever looked at a way of doing it with, and I've talked about that before, and I know some people weren't excited about the thought of doing it like the Amish people, you know, as a community group, or like Habitat for Humanity, that we bring in the community to help us, and also with the zoo entry as well. Have we ever thought of making these plans so we can engage the community at the same time in some shape or form, so they have a buy-in into that?
I think smaller components we can, and there'll be some embellishments which we'd probably be seeking some support from the business and wider community through the advisory group and the volunteer groups we have there. To have surety, though, of having tracks and toilets and the entrance to the zoo, to have assurance that we'd actually build those on time to within specification. My view would be that the major component of you only get a contract to do, but I think more of those sort of embellishments and enhancements where it's easy for lay people to get involved, then yes, that's possible.
Just following on from that, is it also a worry that it might cost us more by involving, like setting it all up for community to be there? Because Habitat for Humanity has got mainly lay people, because I've worked on one of the houses and I haven't got a clue how to build a house. So to me, yeah, I would just love to see more of that kind of community involvement, if that's possible, or is that also cost prohibitive, or is it the contractor not wanting to, or being even able to do that kind, having that involvement?
Like, my experience is that contractors want to do the job, and getting community groups involved can cause complications for them. And obviously they're business people, they want to be efficient and effective and obviously make some money. But on the flip side, I think probably components of it that we manage ourselves, then I think that's where council can actually facilitate those types of things. But those would probably be more the enhancements where we can, get a whole lot of community people in there and do it on a day and organise it and that sort of thing. So if there's community organisations or NGOs that we can actually include in that with the wider community, then that's something we can look at.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Rob.
Yeah, a couple of questions on the emerging issues. This is paragraph 86 on page 58. And the first one is around the Western wastewater interceptor duplication, where previously we recorded a potential significant capital cost saving. Are you concerned that much of that capital cost saving may now be lost as we get into the contract and find that there's further unknown work that needs to be done?
No, I'm not. I'm really comfortable. I had a good briefing on it yesterday, in fact, and like everything, we've got a risk profile and we had to do some work to understand it. We've done that work. We've had engagement with the contractor, and I can't guarantee it, but I'm almost certain that we'll deliver that project within the contingency that we've indicated, which means the savings we've indicated would stay intact.
So the savings are not significantly at risk?
No,
you're just
not
giving
at
us
this
maybe
stage.
a heads up
I
that it
think
might not be quite as good as we thought it might have been?
Yes, so at the point of time when I wrote this report, there was a signal I was getting.
Yep.
But since then, only yesterday, I've had a good briefing, and Chris Barton's done an excellent job in engagement with the contractor to manage that risk and looking at some innovative ways to do it so we can pull it back within the contingency that you've already approved. So I think the savings will be unaffected.
Okay, thank you for that. And the seismic upgrades in paragraph 90, is that a big red flag going up that, given that we haven't provided in the 10-year plan for any major spends in that area, are we up for potential? And I see we've got a briefing coming up, but are we up for some big surprises in terms of what we might need to do, which we haven't presently funded, which we haven't provided provision for funding?
So first thing I'd say is it's not really a surprise. I think we had a conversation in developing our 10-year plan, and council has decided not to put in any funding for things we didn't know about, but there was an expectation that there would be funding requirements coming through from the portfolio. So what council decided to do was fund us to do what we call ISAs and DSAs, which were initial seismic assessments, and then that would trigger detailed seismic assessments. So we have a portfolio of about 7 buildings that we're looking at, and by the end of this year, we will be at the point where we've done the detailed seismic assessments.
Yep.
And there will be dollars involved in remedial works on those buildings in some shape or form. So for next year, it's an annual plan item. So as part of the annual plan process, we are coming to you, and we've signalled at this stage that
For this annual plan or for the next year?
for this annual plan. So for 1920, There is some work that we have identified that we will need to do. So we'll bring it to the annual plan so council can have a proper discussion on that and go through the consultation on the annual plan for that.
So we'll get a bit of a heads up on that in this February briefing, will we, in terms of
Yes, absolutely.
what it is and what,
Yep.
what the likely costs are going to be?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and just the last question, you know, I sort of see you, Chris, in your new role as wandering around the office with this big checkbook in your back pocket, with some major spends and, you know, and delivering on our capital 10-year plan. I'm just reflecting on the comment in report item 12 where Paul and Richard say, and this is under item 6, the approach outlined in this report is not about tightening belts or restructuring, it's about thinking differently. Given your sort of nearly a year into this role, are you comfortable that across the organisation you're being given enough leeway to consider other ways that we might do capital funding as opposed to the way that we've done it in the, you know, using the traditional models? And I say that because we have got some major spends coming up, and there are new and innovative ways of delivering those spends which might deliver better outcomes as far as our ratepayers are concerned. Are you comfortable that what your intended role is that we are considering, you know, with Paul and Richard in the background in terms of this reimagining, that we are actually able to deliver different ways of thinking around how we deliver assets to the city?
Look, there's lots of answers to that question, but the overriding one is yes. Look, I've been given the role of having an oversight of the capital program. So look, my observations, and it's been 6 months establishing my group, so my overall observation has been delighted when I've had a line of sight across the organisation and how various groups have been delivering projects. Like, there's some really good stuff being done across all of the groups, but the line of sight across them does give me ability to look at opportunities. For our first 6 months, we've always seen that a big part of the savings are just going to come from increased vigilance and discipline in what we do in our project delivery, and those are things like the procurement models that we're using now, our procurement strategies, really engaging with our supply chain to know when to go onto the market for various things. Natalie is driving through the PMO with great support from across the business, a scope vigilance sort of process to, you know, ask the questions, which we always ask, but with a lot more discipline now. Like, do we need to do the project? Why do we need to do it like this? Can we do it differently? What are the ways to do, different ways to do things? What is a big one is, you know, I think at times we spend to budget rather than program. So if we're programmed to do, I'll call them 4 widgets, build your 4 widgets and bank the savings. Don't be tempted to build 5 widgets because you can. So just good discipline, and I'm really comfortable that we're going to find savings in our program through that. And then on top of that, which is the territory we're moving into now, is looking at the bigger opportunities maybe to do things differently, to collaborate with our neighbours and do things differently. We're already finding things that we're starting to do, like infrastructure has always had a view on 3-year contracts for renewals, and that we're starting to drive that, and the other groups are starting to pick up on that now to get value for money just in how we do stuff. Yeah, so probably a long answer, but like, I'm really positive about what we're doing through just good old-fashioned discipline and looking at what we're doing, and a line of sight now with the data that we got through all the work that Natalie and Paul Gower are doing to look at those opportunities.
Thank you, Chair.
Paula.
Councillor Pascoe asked some of the questions I was going to ask about the seismic upgrades. The only one that remains then, because we'll get some more detail, there's, given that we haven't chosen to fund any seismic work in this plan, can we have some confidence there won't be any asset closure unexpectedly because, like you went into the library and did the right thing and had to keep people safe. The library was closed for a long time. It had a big impact on the community. You're doing the early investigations. What is your sense? Are we going to see some more buildings come to that extent where we may have to close them and stop them being used?
Look, I think, council's considered this issue. You've got a legislative view, which gives us a lot of time to deal with whatever we do. But council has taken a policy position in how they want to deal with that. Part of that policy provision at times will be closing facilities, but also in that policy provision is managing the risk depending on the type of building, what the building is used for, the actual result from the seismic assessment. So there's a lot of options available to council in a policy sense and how you want to deal with that. Our job at the moment is just to do those design DSAs, design seismic assessments, make sure they're right and come to council with the result of that and have a conversation in the context of our policy and get agreement from council what you want to do.
Yeah, thank you.
And sorry, I can't. I can't prejudge the DSAs because we need to get the reports back with that number in terms of the percentage sort of compliance. So there will be buildings that are under 20%, which will mean that there is a policy decision for council to make.
That's right. So we can assume that there will be some core community and infrastructural assets that will be under the 20%.
I think that would be safe to assume that is, and I think that's why council has put the policy in place, and it's why I believe they've put provision in there for council to not close buildings but assess the risk and have other options which are risk-based decisions for council. So we won't be contravening any legislative requirements. Council have put in a pretty tough policy provision so they can make their decisions on what to do.
Yeah, no, that's not my concern. I guess my concern is this is a problem that the whole country is facing with seismic. I did watch the news the other day and noticed that half of the buildings in Martin are going to struggle to come anywhere near the right standard. Luckily, hopefully that's not the case in Hamilton, but I think it's just that transparency with the public about where the costs might sit, because if you go into an asset and it does need temporary closure or it can't be used for its purpose for a period of time, it has huge ramifications for the public.
Yep, and I think they're all the policy provisions you made take account of some of those things, and the type of use of the building, the importance of the building, etc.
Thank you.
Thanks. Chris, I've just got a couple of questions on Rotokauri, page 52, paragraph 37 through 39. Talks about being in alignment with developers and designating things and planning work for stormwater swales and things like that. I've privately been advised and publicly seen it mentioned that the appetite for development out there is given DCs and a few other things, is waning. Is that a proper assessment? Would that be a...
Look, I don't think that is correct. I think it's a challenging area out there with the stormwater issues, but we're certainly in active discussions and positive discussions with developers about developing the Rotokauri area in innovative ways and looking at financing options. But look, what I'm hearing now and seeing now is quite positive about Rotokauri and developing Rotokauri.
You're talking about deferrals.
Yep. So what I'm alluding to there, like some of the value that we create in the capital program is our partnerships with developers. So sometimes we program to do things, and in this case it's designating and planning transport corridors and green swales, which cost lots and lots of money to do. Sometimes the value is working in partnership with a developer to not do that and find other ways to do it. So sometimes it's just holding back and not doing those designations while we progress discussions with developers about partnerships and how we do things that will create value for council as well. So what I'm signalling there is you'll see a deferral coming through from some pretty significant infrastructure planning. It's not because we haven't got the ability to progress it, it's because we're choosing to put it on hold while we continue those discussions with our partners in the development community and how to develop that area.
Okay. Now, I know there's an element of theatre that goes on between you and developers, and they're kind of suggesting that, no, we won't do it if the DCs are this much, or certainly that's what it looks like in the media, and certainly every now and then you get your own phone calls from people you know.
Look, clearly, I don't want to leave clearly the DC levels are challenging.
Yep.
All I'm saying is they are challenging, but there's lots of good active discussions going on at the moment on how we develop that area.
To what extent, and this may be more Jen's area than yours, but to what extent do you look at the actual marketability of a section because of the $100,000 DCs, etc., and the existing costings and whatnot, puts it out of the market? To what extent do we see? Do you have visibility of those things? Because we're not the last person in line here. The developers, they have to sell it at the end of the day to someone, and if it's a section that's at $500,000 when it could have been 300,000, it just can't be sold.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can't be sold.
Yeah. Look, I'm probably intruding into Jen's area here, but I think you answered the question yourself at the end there, I think. Like at the end of the day, it's the developer who's judging the market and what he could sell the sections for.
So Jen, so developers would obviously be saying to you that, look, we can't do it, that the market just won't buy a 500 or whatever it is, a $600,000 section. Are you getting that response?
So I would support what Chris said in terms of the information that it's the developers that will make all of those calls, and they will make business decisions on pieces of land that they have on with a number of variables in mind. I guess we are coming to you with the data that we have in this space in April, I think the briefing is, where we are going to do a briefing for you on the impact of the DC policy. So at that briefing, we will bring all of the data that we have in this space, and we're also in the process of having a whole lot of conversations with developers across the city to get their anecdotal feedback on where we're at as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, and you have discussed Thomas Road earlier. Just how much of the cost how much have the costs escalated, and what is being sacrificed? Now, sacrifice might be the wrong word, but I think you said there that you were moving things around, doing that thing you do in this capital projects thing.
No, what I think I said there was when we came to you, we got approval to do a project, and what we do at that time is we assess the risks and we put a contingency in to deal with the risk. So the contingency that we've allowed for that one, is my understanding, is sufficient to deal with the issues that we've encountered. So we're not sacrificing anything in this case. We're delivering exactly what we said we would for the approval that we had from council. So that's the current position as I understand it. Okay. So we're not on that case. Look, quite often if we do have some budget challenges, we might look to re-engineer and value engineer the property, but in the project. But in this case, it hasn't been. It's still the same project that we're delivering within the cost within the contingency allowances we made.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Are there any more questions? All right.
Can I just chip in, if I may, Chair, through the Chair? Just wanted to talk about quickly or highlight on page 66, our renewals program. I just wanted to highlight is a significant project going on within Council, and that is to replace our financial system, Microsoft AX. That program is budgeted for, but it's a large program and designed to bring benefits to Council, including addressing a number of issues that the Audit and Risk Committee have with some of the recommendations we have from Audit New Zealand and PwC. The key benefits not only will save money over the 10-year plan, but it's part of our philosophy in IES to reduce the number of systems that we work with so that we can have just one source of truth. So I just wanted to flag that with you. It's quite a key project. I'm not thinking it will impact anything with regard to the Finance Committee, as we'll finish the year out on our current system, so all our numbers will be produced out of our existing system. But we'll be looking forward to a lot more benefits in the new system towards the end of the year, including the ability to work better with our communities through having a digital platform where they can have an online portal and get involved with Council and make it easier for them to deal with us. So just sort of highlight that.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move the report be received. James, Gary, any debate? All right, I'll put it. Those in favour, those against. Was anyone against? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Right, item number 10, annual monitoring report, page 75. Thank you, Chris, etc.
So first up, our Tracy Musty, our financial controller, couldn't be here with us today. Suddenly, she has some family issues she has to deal with. So there was a couple of days of preparation that we've missed out. So if there are any detailed questions on this year's financial accounts that I can't answer, that we'll take note of those and come back to you via email. But if I can just start off by talking about these results for the annual monitoring report. They represent results as of the 31st of December 2018. So that means it's a 6-month financial result for Council, and that means also that we're halfway through our financial year. These results, along with forecast numbers in the financial strategy monitoring report, you will see next week, and they'll present the baseline numbers to our annual plan discussions. So that's really important. So when we get into our discussions next week, and we're trying to understand in terms of any adjustments to year 2 of the long-term plan, these numbers in this report flowing through to the financial strategy monitoring report, which is our updated view of the 10-year plan, that will be our baseline. The assumption there is that Council approves that baseline. So our accounting result after 6 months is a surplus of $29.4 million, and that's a $1.8 million favourable result against a year-to-date forecast surplus of $27.6 million. Our balancing the books result, and remember this is a subset of our accounting result, and it aims to measure whether Council's everyday revenue is covering Council's everyday costs, is a surplus of $6 million. This result is $5.7 million favourable against our year-to-date forecast of $300,000. Now, these results are driven primarily by higher than forecast revenue, largely driven by higher fees and charges, interest and DC revenue. And they're also driven by lower costs year-to-date across a number of areas within Council. And whilst appearing too good to be true, sometimes it can be, in the sense that caution needs to be taken when interpreting this result, because it's very favourable, as a number of cost underspends in areas like operating and maintenance and in professional costs are not linear, and there's some cost to come in the back half of the year, which will narrow that result. Additionally, there is work that has been done in the first 6 months, it's yet to be invoiced, and staff are working really hard with suppliers to make sure that they give us progress invoices so that our accounts reflect truly the cost incurred by council. The Balancing the Books year-end forecast, and it's very important for us to keep an eye on that, is noted to be a forecast of a deficit of 6.7 million, and that's 2.7 million favourable than our annual budget. So our budget for the year one of the 10-year plan is a deficit of 9.4 million, and we're currently forecasting to be at a deficit of 6.7 million. Now, I believe this to be a conservative forecast. I think there's upside in our second half of the year results, but I'm not 100% close to that, given staff's focus on the annual plan. But when we come and bring back the annual monitoring report at the next Finance Committee, we'll be a lot more comfortable that a robust forecast review has been done for the second half of the year. Needless to say, we're looking very positive. So there are some forecast adjustments in the report, and you'll see those on page 79 of the agenda. High level in terms of Treasury, we remain fully compliant with policy. Our debt is 125 million lower than what we expect it to be in the annual budget. That is at year end, but that's to be expected and aligns with our capital expenditure forecasts. So I'll take the rest of the report as read and happy to answer whatever questions I can.
Ryan?
Thanks, David. First question on page 79, just regarding increased city growth revenue. The city planning reference to Perry plan change, was that the Te Awa Lakes thing that's still?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. And what was the food premise legislative changes?
So the Food Act was changed and it allowed people who had multiple venues, so like a chain store, to get their food licensing services from a single supplier. And what that meant for us was that there are a number of places in Hamilton who are part of those chain stores who now do not get that service from the Hamilton City Council.
Hence loss of revenue or decrease?
Hence the loss of revenue, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just get some expansion on that? So a guy that's got Robert Harrison, he's got 4 things. He used to have to get 4 licences. Now does he just only have to get 1 for all of them?
No, they can get them all together, so they choose a single supplier that's a commercial operation, and they go there instead of coming to the Hamilton City Council. So, for example, they might have them across borders, so they'll have 3 in Auckland and 1 in Raglan and 1 here, and they don't have to come to the Hamilton City Council.
What is the service they're getting?
They're
getting the permit to be a restaurant,
yeah, and
coffee
the
shop.
inspections, yeah.
I'll have to find that out. I'll ask about it afterwards. Thank you.
Also, the next box down, the ongoing licence and support for the DC growth model. Again, probably your area, Jen. Can you just elaborate on that?
I can. What page do you want?
Page 79.
Let me just grab the number. You can probably tell me what the number is before I can get to
Oh,
it.
the
Is it 144?
194K due to the ongoing licence and support for the DC growth model that was unbudgeted for.
Okay, so there are the growth model that we run to manage DCs and provide growth information requires a level of ongoing technical support, and the money was in the conversation around the 10-year plan, and unfortunately didn't make it into the numbers, so it is there now.
So you need like Stephen Hallowell to make an app, insert your number here.
I would use him.
Okay.
An avatar, maybe.
On page 86, 87, now I appreciate this is a bit of a catch-all, but we've got quite a lot of other costs as a line item, and I note that in democracy services, and I think it came through in a few of the others, it's the lion's share of cost, but we don't get the visibility to it in this report. So I just wondered if you could speak to that.
I'd like to speak to that. And normally I remember, but I can't remember what's in there, but it's relating to a number of very legitimate costs. And what I'll do is I'll send an email around to answer that question tomorrow or later today, depending. We might finish early.
Well said.
Hopefully it'll be the same answer I get when I ask that question.
You have asked it before.
Tons of times.
But on the balancing the books thing, Dave,
What page number are you on?
Sorry, this is page 76. I think you spoke to it, but would some of that be related to what Chris shared in terms of delaying and big capital expenditure and that sort of thing?
Not related to the balancing the books in the sense that we remove capital spending from the balancing books, from the accounting record to get down to an everyday cost versus everyday revenue. Right. That was our problem in the past, having capital revenue come in there and not really seeing the true running costs of the city. So fundamentally, we've done a very good job this year in terms of cost savings, but our costs aren't linear and we have higher costs in the second half.
Well, it sort of brings me to my next question. On page 92, under planning and development, you've said fees and user charges are 467k favourable, and then you talk about, as such, we make a forecast adjustment. I appreciate if something's going to cost more, you adjust, because it's going to cost more, you adjust the budget. When it's going to cost less, why do we adjust it down? Doesn't that therefore hide the benefit that we would have received? Like showing it as a positive variance?
No, so in terms of budget, we never change the budget, right? But in terms of forecasting, we do use that as a roadmap to manage our spending or our savings through the year. So whether a cost is higher or lower, if we know that to be true, we will incorporate that into a modified budget, if you like, for that area.
So the budget stays, the forecast is always fluctuating, is what you're saying?
Yeah, the forecast. I mean, I had a similar conversation with Gary, and the budget is the budget is the budget, and that's what we'll be held accountable to deliver. But the forecast we use as a roadmap through the year at different milestone points, so the end of each month, and to actually track the decisions made by council and things and initiatives that we see that we can do, so that when we internally do management reporting, we understand and see the new number rather than the old budget target, which might not be relevant anymore.
Yeah. On page 101, talking about right at the bottom there, the Thomas Gordonton intersection. Am I reading that the subsidy was over budgeted for? So you expected more subsidy than we did receive? And does that fit into Chris's comment about the need to use the contingency?
I might ask Chris to answer that one.
Sorry, I think that it's the first project where we've got an enhanced subsidy on. So we normally get 51% subsidy. The government's got a new policy that restricted projects we can get what we call an enhanced subsidy. And on that one, it's the first in the country, I think, that got funded at 75%. So we've got more revenue coming in. I think we brought that to council and reinvest that in one of the slips on the river. Is that the issue?
But you knew it was coming in, but did you think more was coming in because it says you've over budgeted?
It's a straight out error in the budget when the calculation of the subsidy against the expenditure should have been at our normal subsidy rate. So the enhanced VAR story, which Chris told us is correct, but that happened after the budget was set. So even with the enhanced VAR, we still had an error in the budget of more subsidy than that project was ever going to get. It's just straight out typing error or loading error or something.
You got so excited with the extra subsidy.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. So we have to show that. So that's the correction of that. So that's what that is.
That's okay. Back to page 79, just reading through that, the increased revenue. So we had the increased city revenue from growth, 847, but we also had corresponding expenses, which left a surplus of 272, but that was magically the same amount as the Peacock operating budget, which wasn't accounted for. Was that just coincidence?
It was magic.
I don't think it is exactly the same, is it? I did that calculation last night.
I think the topic there is that there were some unbudgeted costs that needed to be built in because it was costs that council needed to incur. In terms of revenue forecasts, we were as conservative with regard to our revenue forecast, and I think, as we've heard, there's more upside than downside, but it was not being overly optimistic in our budgeting. So we've increased our revenue to offset those known costs that we can't save.
Really what you're saying is you've increased the contingency for the operating budget for Peacock with that surplus.
Yep. Well, there was a resource that is required to manage the program that we had left out in the 10-year plan, and so that resource needs to be there. So, but it wasn't in our numbers, so we've trued that up so that we know what costs are in the future.
I noticed that also with the cost to clean up illegal dumping, it was a 207k extra cost, but that magically equaled the increased water rates and stormwater consultancy savings.
What page are you on, Ron?
Page 80 as well. Sorry, page 80.
Page 80.
Can I just say, it's not entirely magical, in that these things offset.
Yeah.
The only group that have a delegation to move things into a future year or things like that is council. So the policy for staff, and in a similar way with the old risk and opportunities, is that for minor adjustments that we're looking to declare them in a net zero circumstance. And so that the top of page 80 is talking about that in the sense of the housekeeping adjustments. We're trying to net things off. So there'll be ups and downs, and it's across the entire budget, not necessarily in a single space.
When you say across the budget, Stephen, are you referring to all the different committees of council? Like this isn't just...
I'm talking about the
Activities.
the activities of council, all the activities of council, so that there could be movement between activities as part of the net zero, and consistent with Richard's delegation for managing the total budget.
What was that term you used? You've got to declare
zero.
things at net zero.
Yeah, that's the rule that we're applying. So there's winners. There's not winners and losers. There's ups and downs, and that's what we're looking for. The more significant things that have the flow-on effect are coming back to you guys for decisions, and those decisions are reflected in the next report we'll look at.
Thank you.
Rob.
Just expanding on Councillor Hamilton's question around page 86 and 87 and that other costs. It seems to me that we are tracking pretty much in accord with budget and pretty much in accord with the way that it went in the previous year. Is the answer, and I know that questioning around this, the magnitude of these other cost lines comes up quite quickly. Is it perhaps a signal that we should be expanding on our budgets in a little more detail, so that when these reports come through and you have 707,000 in one line called other costs, which isn't really that clear what they are, that they are actually shown separately?
The other costs, I mean, it's unique to democracy, and it'll be largely councillor remuneration. So that's not in personnel costs. So that's what it will be, and what we're trying to do. So that's the answer,
because I think you said you would get back with an answer.
Yeah, I will get back to you. The large portion is councillor remuneration.
So what you're saying is we can't really, or we don't want to expand the general ledger reporting lines.
We do. We do.
Include that in these reports.
Yeah, this is a summary report. We can show lots and lots of detail. It's just a matter of how much detail you want
to receive it.
Well, how much you want to see. I understand the question of other costs, and it's a large number, and as you can see there's no other cost area where councillor remuneration would be, which is my first port of call, and I would think that the majority of that number relates to elective services and councillor remuneration, but I'll confirm that tomorrow.
So, so we could set a threshold by which any of these miscellaneous type things, if it's above $1 million or above $500,000, you need to break it down so that all that's left in other or miscellaneous is a threshold figure which we're comfortable to not know about, or not have total visibility on what it is.
In terms of the explanations below, we explain anything that has a variance over $100,000, and so that's just to give you, from a governance perspective, a surety, because there's no variance and these costs were budgeted in the 10-year plan. There's no conversation being had about it, but I certainly take your point, and I can, as I say, I'll come back to you quickly with that regard to that.
So as a practical solution, rather than to rewrite or readjust the general ledger program itself to report these, maybe just to put a box underneath and just say that the major items and other costs are, and maybe just include the major part of what's in that.
And in that list, you'll still have one item called other, but it just be a lot
but
smaller
it
than it
might
is now.
only be 20 grand or something.
Yeah, but it'll be smaller than it is now. Yeah.
Maybe a more practical solution is for Tracy to be here, and she'll be able to answer you in 2 seconds.
Okay.
For our financial controller to be
Yeah,
here.
some things are coming back to me as I'm thinking about this conversation. I'm looking at venues and tourism and see the variance. Other costs are event sponsorship payments, and then I look further down and I see other costs are legal costs, and there's a list in the ledger of about 30 or so, maybe 40 different codes that in every activity they're different.
And they're unique to that particular activity.
And so they don't collate into a single group, into a financial statement like finance costs and personnel costs do nicely. And so I think I'd take the Chair's point about looking for a threshold that we identify, but I think we're still going to end up, because it's a sum of a number of budgets, you're still going to end up potentially with $250,000 in the other, not 20,000 in an activity.
Okay. And Chair, my second question is around paragraph 9 on page 76, and I was caucusing with Tracy on some responses to the questions I had on this. And I had hoped that I would have got those and not had to raise it at the meeting. But I just need some clarity around the fact that if you look at the year-to-date surplus around balancing the books, which is currently actual is 6 million, and the annual forecast is 6.7 million deficit, we are over the next 6 months looking at $12.7 million worth of additional costs over net revenue, because over the next 6 months we will get revenue in and we will have day-to-day running costs, but we're basically looking to find 12.7 million. And it seems a very, very large...
So you're saying we're operating at $12.7 million worse in the next 12 months, in the next 6 months?
No. What I'm saying is we're running at 6 million surplus for the first, and in order to bring it back to where we're forecasting our budget, we need $12.7 million worth of additional expenditure over and above our day-to-day revenue versus expenditure over that 6-month period. And, paragraph 9, page 76. And it's the first, there are 2 blocks in there, and it's the first numbers in each of the blocks. Year-to-date actual, 6 million surplus, and forecast, annual forecast, which is a comparison to actual of 6.7 million.
Negative.
And so that to me is a really, and I don't want to get into debate or discussion on it. Do you think sort of, and you've addressed some of the issues in your presentation, David, do you think 6 weeks into the second half of the year, it's clearer whether or not that annual forecast of 6.7 million may need revision, and that we may not end up with a $6.7 million deficit for balancing the books up to June.
Yeah, absolutely, and I do think it needs revision. As I said in my opening address, I think that there's upside on this annual forecast because, as I say, staff have worked on the annual plan. We haven't had that normal, robust forecasting throughout the business. Additionally, forecasting is new to everybody too, so we need to keep driving an understanding of our forecasting and the timeliness of that. When I looked into it, because I was aware of your question, it fundamentally is in the operating and maintenance area and professional costs area. It's no, like revenue is robust in terms of forecast, so this is a cost-related topic. In terms of work done and work invoiced was my reference to some maintenance work done by suppliers that they haven't invoiced yet. So the work's been done and we've got those invoices to flow through, which would change our current position. But on the other side of it, I think that with the cost-saving activities that we talked about earlier, I think there's some upside in our next 6 months in terms of our costs not being as large as in those areas as what was first forecast. So rest assured, the next Finance Committee, we will have done that process and come back with a picture that I'll be a lot more comfortable with.
Rob, can I just ask on that? It would seem unusual for me that a contractor wouldn't get its invoice, his or her invoice in as soon as possible. So Stephen's smiling away.
That's true for small contractors.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, but and even big, you go out of business if you don't. So are you saying that the invoices are coming into us, but hang on, but we're not processing them? Or are you literally saying people are not sending invoices in on time?
No, what I'm really saying is that when a supplier does work for council, they need to confirm that work's done and provide us information that they've done that work before we can close off purchase orders. And normally the delay is that communication between the supplier and council to be confident that the charge has actually incurred by council. So whether invoices come or not.
So what's an example?
So if someone's got a long-running maintenance agreement for our air conditioning, for example, and we're not talking enough to our air conditioning suppliers who maintain our air conditioning for the building, they might come and do that on a regular basis, then our reporting of that, meaning closing off on that expense so it shows in our books, would not be there. So what we're doing as a staff is talking to all our large suppliers and saying we need faster information. So if you've done work for us, we need to know quick, damn smart, so that we can actually recognise that cost in our books. What normally happens, and it's that hockey stick, is you get towards the end of the year and then everyone wants to get their invoices in, and we have this amazing amount of cost that goes through the books in the last two months of the year, and that's not helpful for us for our cash flow forecasting as well as...
I want all my money as soon as I can.
Oh, 100%. And smaller contractors are very, very good. Yeah. It's normally that larger contractors spend their energy and effort doing the work for us to make sure that we maintain our levels of service, but sometimes we don't get the back end of it sorted out as well as we need to. So they're different people within the organisation.
Just as a final question, through you, Chair, could I ask for some urgency on this? Because to me, there's some real credibility issues around the budget that we set last year, particularly the balancing the books budget, which was premised pretty much on a fairly substantial rate increase.
Sure. And
I would like to make sure that what we promised we would deliver to the ratepayer is in fact what we're going to deliver. Sure. And if we don't, what specific reasons exist for having not delivered it in accordance with that budget. Thank you.
Sorry, Rob, just to be clear so we know what we're doing. You're thinking we might not be delivering some services, i.e. not...
Look, Chair, I've got no idea. All I'm not doing is looking at a significant variation between the actual year-to-date balancing the books, which is 6 million positive, which, is really good news. And then we've got $12.7 million in costs still to come. And I'm just worried that how accurate that assessment is, and maybe we need to put some resources in over the next 6 months to make sure that as a governance group we have a clear direction of travel as to where the final result might land in terms of our accountability back to ratepayers.
Okay, You know what
Thank
that
you.
means? Yep. Okay, thank you. Bella?
Thank you, Chair. Team, just following on from Councillor Pascoe's question, actually, if I look at the P&L on page 82, if we look at the gains and losses, we've got our 3.4 million loss on interest rate swaps. When you look at the budget and the forecast, there's nothing in there. So if I was to compare apples with apples, when I look at balancing the books result, you also have a volatility in the current result based on the interest rate swap loss, but that wasn't accounted for in the annual budget. So I guess my question is, you could hedge account tomorrow and take that off for P&L, and then you've got a like-for-like comparison, and there'll be a 9 million variation.
Yeah, we don't budget for the revaluation every month of our interest rate swaps because we know we don't know what it is, and we know that if we stay in our swaps to the end of the term, there'll be no impact on council. So that's the position we've taken.
Okay.
But happy to have conversations about how we could do it differently or better. It's not in the balance in the books, I'm just told. It's removed. So
Is that part of?
that's part
sorry,
of our
yeah,
construction
no,
of
you're
the balance in the books.
Okay, yeah, apologies. And just on the presentation of the Treasury reporting,
Yep.
What page are you, Bill?
sorry, further on,
There's lots further on.
107.
page 107.
Thank you.
Is it possible to, I keep asking myself how much fixed rate debt we've got versus when we combine it with the floating, with the interest rate swaps, fixed versus floating. Would it be possible to get a view on
Yep.
how much debt we've hedged?
We used to add
etc.?
that, but we can review.
Isn't it on
What
page
information?
106? Doesn't it say that in that box at
So
the
what we-
top, as at the 31st of December, 35% of our debt was between 0 to 3 years. Is that, am I reading that correctly? And 24% is between 3 to 5 years, is that right?
That's just a graph about when loans mature and what the time
Oh,
period
sorry,
is
is that
they
not what you were
mature.
asking? I
No,
thought that's
I'm
what you were
just-
asking. Beg your pardon, sorry.
In terms of you've met the policy parameters, but how much, I guess,
Yeah.
of our debt
So
have we
we're about on
hedged?
that. So,
Yeah.
so our policy is somewhere between 50 and 95%, and what you're asking is where we're at.
Yeah, where we at?
Yeah, sorry.
We can add that.
Thank you.
Rob, back again.
I just ask one other question, which has just sort of popped into my head, and it is on that Treasury report. Our average cost of capital, and this is on page 106, as at 31st of December, 4.77%. Is that likely to drop significantly? As I understand, there's a major loan repayment coming up in March, and we've refinanced that loan, and I think it's a fairly large loan.
Yep.
What's the likely effect of that at the new interest rate likely to do to our overall cost of capital, which is that 4.7? I mean, I know it'll bring it down,
Yeah,
but
it'll
will it
bring
bring
it
it down? Will it bring it down by as much as 1%?
We'd have to do the numbers and come back to
Okay.
you, Councillor Rob.
But it is a major one, isn't it? It's a
think-
major loan repayment.
Yeah, we've got it listed in the start of the report.
Okay,
I
that's
remember what
fine,
page it is. It's 53 million, I think. In terms of our how much it would reduce the 12-month rolling, it obviously is going to depend on what else we've got in the portfolio. One of the things I can say around these questions is that traditionally we've wanted to have a midpoint around our fixed rate position, and of late, going into last year, we didn't spend, we deferred some capital and we got higher revenue, so our debt was lower. So what we're aiming to do is get closer to the 50% rather than 95%, because we want to take advantage of the lower market rates that we can access to. Hamilton City Council can get access to borrowings at the same rate as the New Zealand Government through the Local Government Funding Authority. So so it's a risk discussion. It's about how much risk do you want? Do you want to be 100% fixed on your debt? It'll cost you more. or are you comfortable with the long-term forecasts of interest rates to the point where you want to leave a higher percentage of your debt on a floating arrangement and take advantage of those lower rates? So we're just working through that now in terms of how, the Treasury policy is sound, but it's how we respond to the parameters within the Treasury policy is which we were doing
Is
some work
that
on.
suggesting that would trigger some sort of briefing for management to get an indication as to what the risk appetite might be around the council table?
I think the risk appetite's been measured by the parameters in the policy. One thing that we are doing, though, is not entering into new swaps to leave more and more of a percentage of our debt as taking advantage of the lower rates.
Yes,
So,
sorry, David.
that's right.
Yeah, so Councillor Pesco makes a really good point. So one of the conversations that David is leading, actually, I can steal your thunder a little bit here, is about risk appetite, and that's across all our risks, and that includes Treasury. The range in the Treasury policy, I'd argue, are quite generous, but leaning towards probably conservatism in terms of this range, but it's quite conservative.
Certainty, you mean?
Well, the range is, so we have a fixed portfolio that enables us to go up to 90%? 95%.
Fixed, yeah.
Yeah, right, and we've got and the bottom end's quite, it's a broad range, and so 50%, so that's a broad range, right? So that's where management operate within, and the challenge we've got as an organisation is we've never really articulated effectively across all of our risks the risk appetite that this council has, and there are consequences of risk. If you decide you want to have an aggressive risk appetite, in fact, or you want to take on more risk, have better, for using Treasury example, more opportunity to get access to lower rates, there are consequences. And we've got and David's leading, and the reason I'm saying David's stealing thunder, David's put a lot of work in with the risk team to build a workshop on risk coming up. And a big part of that is going to be talking about risk appetite and so forth, and trying to get council's view of risk. Risk is just a conversation about levels of service and budget. It's a strategic dynamic that we need to address, right? We've been really slack as an organisation about articulating that appetite for our strategic direction through our 10-year plan in a way that means you can adjust that level of service as we're progressing. So your challenge and your question, really long-winded answer, sorry, Councillor, but yes, we should have a briefing on it, but it should be part of the overall briefing about appetite for risk, and it might be some sub-briefings about particular topics because they're so complex in their own right. Like Treasury is moderately complex, but once you get the nuts and bolts sorted out, you're starting to talk about some high-level principles. How much exposure do you want to have? Yes or no? Is that too much? Is that too little? Do you want to have an opportunity to gain some upside, or do you want to cap it and limit the downside? I don't know. So we have to have that conversation with you guys. So briefing about overall risk, and then David might well get our PwC cronies back in town again and refresh the approach they've done previously. I think we need to move away from explaining what a hedge is, because that's a pointless conversation. What we need to do is change the conversation to what is exposure do you want, and how hard do you want to chase the rate as it's dropping against your drive for some level of conservatism about how far out you want to hedge it and fix it, right? And that's for you guys to tell us, and we can then model that, but then that results in certain outcomes when it comes to managing the financials.
Okay.
It's pretty simple.
Thank you. Yeah. Good, thank you, Richard. We've got no more questions. I'm happy to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Mallet Casson. Any debate, sorry? Okay, those in favour, those against. Is anyone against? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to item 11. This will be the last one before lunch, page 108.
Just before we start, just like to introduce Chrissy Hager. She's Corporate's Business Manager, so she works alongside me and is a tremendous help for me. You would have seen a lot of Stephen Halliwell. You wouldn't have seen a lot of his cricket prowess, but there isn't much. But Stephen, we'll see less of Stephen and we'll see more of Christy. So this is a training exercise for Christy, but it's also the importance of having Stephen here is, as you saw through the 10-year plan, has been quite instrumental to us, certainly around the expertise around rates, so it won't be the last you've seen Steve.
Thank you, David. Mr. Chair, this is our third financial monitoring report, and it largely follows the format of the last one. It's the last of the 3 monitoring reports that together fulfil the function of this committee to monitor the performance against the 10-year plan. The recommendations in this report individual items arising from the OPEX and CAPEX reports, but they're here in this report so that we consider them in the light of the financial strategy. Before I discuss further items in the report, I take pleasure in informing you that the Auditor-General this month recognised our financial strategy as the best in the sector in his report to Parliament on the 10-year plans across the country. It's nice to get some recognition, and I believe our recognition came as a result of months of hard work by many staff members and elected members. But more importantly, we have identified the best way to measure financial success and apply those concepts to our budgeting processes. It was your very good understanding of the strategy that allowed for a significant change, a significant and well-considered change to the draft financial strategy as a response to consultation. This report looks at the long-term impacts of a changing environment on our financial strategy. It's important in the context of ensuring that we can maintain service levels, capital investment and proposed rates increases in an ongoing way and stay within our constraints. Our biggest constraint is our ability to borrow funds to fund growth investment. In our financial strategy, this has manifested itself in years 3 to 5, where we have very little headroom gap in our debt to revenue ratio, as shown in the graph on page 31. Events of the past 6 months have been more favourable to our financial strategy, with debt capacity at year 3 increasing from 3 million to 20 million. Better than forecast rates, more NZTA subsidy income have had a positive impact on this. This is great for the start of our journey. I do note, however, with caution, that a $20 million gap is a small gap in the context of the roughly 1.3 billion we're going to spend from year 1 to year 3. Past risk and opportunities report suggests we tend to get more adverse unplanned items than we get positive items. The financial strategy graphs that you will adopt today become the starting point for the annual plan, the annual budget conversations for 1920. In that context, they show the starting position supports the rates and service levels and capital programs forecast in year 2 of the plan. And that's all I want to address at the moment, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Stephen. Do we have any? Rob?
A couple of questions. I'm pleased to hear that the Audit Office gave us the thumbs up in their parliamentary. Have the discussions that we've had with the Audit Office since their report, where they modified our reimagining, sort of expectations, have they sort of indicated whether they have now second thoughts about that modification and whether they're likely to withdraw that going forward? Or I know they won't withdraw it from that report, but in terms of the comfort levels that they might now have around our ability to save that $94 million.
Yeah, their confidence level hasn't changed. They're confident that we can deliver it, but feel the need to make that comment in the audit report. As you'll know, there's a new audit partner that we have. Leon's moved on to a different audit, so we're just working through helping the new audit partner understand Hamilton City Council. But I have had no reason to think that they are
Still
any more
concerned about that modification.
Yep, their confidence is building as they understand exactly what we aim to deliver in this report is something that has helped them understand the scope of our activities and for them to gain confidence that we'll be able to achieve the savings.
So the audit reports at a point in time, they don't change it.
Yeah, no, I mentioned that. I didn't expect, but I wondered whether, my question was really around whether their comfort levels have have modified, I use the word modified.
Whether it
since.
modifies or not is still a significant assumption until we probably achieve a significant portion of the savings. So I would suggest it's not a bad thing. The modification isn't a bad comment. It's the fact that there's an aspect of our 10-year plan that was assumed and there's no track record to support it rather than their confidence or otherwise. So as we progress, that may well change, but everything else changes when we do a 10-year plan anyway.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
Okay, and just one last point. I just wondered if in the staff recommendation under 2A, where you've got the additional 10.7 million, can we put in brackets after that aggregate total or something similar, 36.9, just so that we're kind of keeping a little bit of a, to add 10 million onto a figure which was previously, I presume, about 26 million, to bring it up to the 36.9, which I read in paragraph 25. It would be useful for us to just to have that rolling figure so that we know where it's going up and down over time.
We've got, we're certainly...
Have I got that right?
We're disclosing the number in this report.
Yeah.
And so the reason why it's only 10.7 million is that this is asking council to approve a new number, not all of the number,
I realise that, but
not revisit it.
Yeah, but I just would prefer to have the total now, which is 30, which I add up, and I may be wrong, 36.9 million,
So
as being the total that's...
You'd rather it say an addition of 10.7 million capital projects, taking the year-to-date figure to 330...
The aggregate figure too.
Yeah, the aggregate figure to 36.9 million, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
If I'm comfortable
That's
making
clear,
that change, if that's what you would like.
Yeah, I guess it just gives us that in a point of time. We might find in the next finance meeting we've managed to get another 10 million ahead of time, in which case that total will drop back by $10 million.
So on page 49 of the agenda in the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report, we do list the 36.9 million.
You do, that's right. You do, that's where I saw it.
I understand what you're asking, and if we can add that to the recommendation, would be...
Yep, you're right. I'm just trying to find...
Page 49, yeah.
Page 49, yeah. That's where I probably saw it to start with, yeah.
So we can put it in the recommendation if you wish.
Just doesn't take the figure in isolation, that's all.
So Rob, just to help out the staff, approves the rephasing and delay referrals of an additional $10.7 million capital projects.
Total year to date now.
Yeah, brackets perhaps, total year to date.
36.9. Are you comfortable with that? Yep.
Is that actually what it is? It is right.
It is 36.9 million.
Yep. And that's the figure if you want to check it.
And that's right. And that's the right description of what it is too, isn't it?
Yep.
And that's the figure that Chris spoke to a little earlier on.
Incorporates the 10.7.
Yep. Thank you.
You okay, Pete?
You got that? Something like that?
Here we go.
Even if you put total year to date, total year to date.
But, okay, what is the year to date we're at?
Yeah, because the resolution has to stand on its own.
Yeah, the resolution is just approving that 10, isn't it? No, yeah, noting the year to date figure, yeah.
But year to date as at?
Noting total year to date. 36.9.
As at 31st of December, right?
Yeah, okay, yep.
Otherwise,
Yep.
it won't stand alone.
Noting, yep. No,
You'll never stand alone.
I'm happy with that if you are.
What's the Liverpool song?
There's a song about
Never walk alone. Never walk alone.
I'm happy to move.
I just got just a couple of things. David and I are in a heated debate.
Call it a marriage.
About the timing of the forecasting. So we're going to do some more work on that, or have some more discussions on that. But just to alert you that there's a little bit flowing around there. Okay, has anyone else got a question? All right, Rob, you've moved, have you? Yeah, and I'll second that. Is there any debate? Okay, those in favour, those against, carried. That was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, I said we'd have lunch.
Well done, Christy.
Is 1:30 okay? Everyone can get fed by then? Okay, can we be back here by 1:30? Thank you.